Hi, it's the Jiu Jitsu Oracle. No Gi Jiu Jitsu is back, and so are we. We had a few weeks off. We missed the IBJJF crown. I was on holiday, and Calum was busy. But with the return of two big no gi events this week, Fight Pass Invitational 9 and Who's Number 1 25, me, Ross, and my co-host Calum are back to preview both events. We're going to dive in first to WNO 25, which is on Wednesday. And for those watching on YouTube, you will see is headlined by Kaynan Duarte against Roberto Jimenez. Anyone listening on podcast, then we'll do our best to inform you of any graphics that are on the screen. But Calum, what do you make of the main event? Kaynan, probably no-gi grappler of the year after his performance at the ADCC, going up against Roberto Jimenez.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting match, a bit of a random one considering we've seen Roberto compete at the under 80 for CJI. I know he does compete at the heavier weight classes more recently as well. And then we saw Kaynan win the absolute for ADCC as well as under 99. I don't believe they've faced off before, so interesting as far as that. And Roberto does do better against bigger guys a lot of the time, so it'll be interesting to see. I think with the kind of people that we usually see having a chance of beating Kaynan is usually guys his size or bigger or leg lockers, and Roberto doesn't fall into either of those categories. Roberto is more known for taking the back from bottom top and standing more from the standing recently. I'll be interested to see Kaynan's strategy, whether he's going to wrestle with Roberto or pull guard against him, just because with the wildness of Roberto's style, I could see him in a scramble get into Kaynan's back, and whether he could do anything with that position, I'm not sure. So I don't know if that's a risk Kaynan would want to take. I could imagine him getting some sort of wrestle up from bottom or getting something off from guard, but I could also see him having some success in the stand-up. It's just whether he wants to take that risk against Roberto.
Yeah, I think Roberto's skill set isn't the best for catching out Kaynan, which can happen when Kaynan comes in cold. But when Kaynan starts well, he's like such a force to be reckoned with. Like if we see the Kaynan that will come out, snatch a single leg, or come out and like pull guard aggressively, I think like Roberto's going to find it really difficult. I agree. Like Roberto's best chance is to be slippery and elusive and try and find his way to Kaynan's back. What do you think about my proclamation that Kaynan's probably the no-gi grappler of the year?
Yeah, I think so. I think his performance at ADCC, you could debate that the strength of schedule wasn't up to par as usual, given that some athletes were over at CGI. But if you take that out of the equation, it's debatably the second most impressive ADCC performance of all time, with 8 wins and 7 out of 8 coming by submission. Had a bunch of success in other competitions throughout the year, like Polaris tournaments and things like that. So I think that is a very fair assessment for Kaynan, even though he did have some kind of shock losses to the likes of Luke Griffiths. But I think that is pretty fair given the achievements he was able to put on the table.
Yeah. And on this WNO card, we have Felipe Pena, who is, I think because they've trained together a fair bit, we could say him and Kaynan are probably good friends. But I would love to see a match between Kaynan and Felipe Pena. Felipe's up against Declan Moody. He did really well at the ADCC, ran Gordon Ryan super close in a super fight, and then won his weight division. Let's talk about Felipe against Declan first, and then we can maybe hypothesize about Felipe potentially facing Kaynan if both won. That would be an obvious match to make, although it would be difficult, I think, given their friendship. Anyway, what do you think about Felipe this year and in this match?
Yeah, so Felipe this year has had some on and off success, but I think if you actually look at the caliber of opponents he was facing, it was only the best guys he was facing. Managed to get the gold in ADCC as well in the over 99 category, which was super impressive. Like I say, some of the super fights were a bit here or there as far as winning, but facing like top guys like Craig Jones and Nicky Rod, so can't really complain. And Declan Moody is definitely a step or two down from those sort of grapplers that I just mentioned. So I think Felipe is the clear favourite in this. Declan has got a good skill set, good wrestling and good passing, but I think Felipe's game is just a bit too intricate, and even if it is like a tough tight match, I think Felipe is a bit too experienced and a bit too good of a tactician to not let that kind of match run away from him.
Why I'm really interested in seeing Felipe go up against Kaynan is that the last two times Felipe faced Gordon Ryan, Felipe did incredibly well to tie up Gordon's legs in the match. And Gordon's passing style is very much focused on getting chest to chest. And I think Felipe's been able to take advantage of the fact that maybe while trying to get there, Gordon's legs and hips get a little bit lighter. And then I was studying Kaynan's passing style, and we talked about, well, you and I didn't, but my coach Casey and I did a sort of no-gi meta analysis coming out of the ADCC and CJI, and we primarily spoke about wrestling, and I wanted to get into speaking about passing. The two guys I've been watching a lot recently are Kaynan and Andrew Tackett, who play very differently. But I think like for big pressure passing no-gi, Kaynan's the guy to watch. Did I say Josh Saunders has done a good analysis of it on YouTube for free? If I didn't, I have now, and you should go and check it out. But then I wanted to see how Kaynan's passing stacks up against Felipe's guard work. And you could say Felipe's probably got the best guard of the heavier weight players in Jiu-Jitsu still. So that's why I want to see it from like a stylistic matchup perspective. What do you think? Would that be an obvious match to make if both those guys won and you could convince them to do it? Perhaps finances come into play and like there's some money given to them and they're convinced. And then how do you think a match would go between those two?
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting match. I think there is few interesting matches around that weight, especially given the absence of Gordon Ryan and Nicholas Merigali at the moment. So the few guys in the mix there would be Kaynan, Nicky Rod, Felipe Pena, maybe Victor Hugo, even though he's quite a bit bigger than those guys. So I think, yeah, there's very few and far between with the legitimately interesting matches you could make, and that's one that's pretty clear. They are quite good friends and training partners now, so how willing they would to do that is kind of in question. But like you say, everyone's got their price, so if a promotion was willing to pay them well enough or give them an opportunity for some sort of belt or super fight in the future, that would be an interesting one. What you're speaking about with Felipe's guard and Gordon's passing, I think is quite interesting. I think Felipe is one of the few heavier guys that plays guard like the lighter guys, like on his back, pummeling his legs, framing really well, getting into the legs. And it does interest me to think about how transferable Gordon's game would be. You know, we always talk about like the pound for pound talk if you were to kind of shrink or upsize certain grapplers so they were the same size, how well Gordon's passing game would translate to someone like Diego Pato or Levi Jones-Leary, just because he's not used to facing that sort of guard on a regular basis. So it's an interesting conversation. I think Kaynan's probably got a bit more experience with those kind of guards, given that that is a bit more common in the IBJJF scene. He's also got lighter training partners with guards like that in his gym. So overall, that would be an interesting match. Again, don't know who would pull guard, who would wrestle, how long the wrestling would go on for, but I think that is an interesting match that could potentially happen.
Okay. The match on this card that I think will be the closest and the one I'm least sure about calling is Pedro Marinho against Isaak Michell. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I think both of these guys are going to be looking to wrestle. Who comes out of that, I'm not really sure. Pedro's obviously got good wrestling as well as a good guillotine. However, Isaac's wrestling isn't very shot heavy. It's very much set up with the hand fighting, snap downs, slide bys, looking to take the back, very much upper body and hand fighting based. So, to what extent Pedro's going to have that guillotine as a threat against Isaak, I don't really know. As far as on the ground, I think typically you see Isaac's passing being a bit more rumble style, like on the outside, which obviously favours him most of the time, having the wrestling advantage and not expecting his opponent to stand up. But I think against Pedro, that is something he's going to have to deal with. If he takes Pedro down, Pedro's probably going to be looking to stand back up again. And then same thing vice versa. So it's going to be interesting if either of them do get the takedown, how they're going to hold each other on the ground while simultaneously looking to pass. I think whoever does do better in the wrestling and can keep their opponent down is going to ultimately win the match. Unless it's a guillotine, probably more likely to see a submission from Isaak. I think he's got a bit more varied attacks. But as far as what they've actually accomplished in the sports and the names that they've beaten, you've got to put your money on Pedro, I think, for this match. I think he's just a bit more proven against who he's beaten previously.
I think pacing is going to be key in this match. Can Pedro get a hold of Isaak and slow him down? I think if Isaak can stay elusive and not get drawn into like long snap down battles, etc., that'll be good for him. I suppose, like you're saying, like the thing is, Isaak might want Pedro to clinch up with him so he can work to hit slide bys, etc. But at the same time, he doesn't want Pedro to clinch up with him in a way that he's going to get slowed down and not be able to move.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. Isaac's going to be looking for the back from like upper body wrestling. Pedro's going to be looking for snap downs into guillotines. Hopefully it's like Isaak can stay elusive and create some scrambles and to get some action. At the same time, I could see Pedro slowing it down and there being parts in the match that have less action. I'm still unsure as to which way it would go. I think you're right in terms of like experience and match play, etc. Like probably favor Pedro, but I wouldn't be surprised if Isaak found his way to Pedro's back at some point. If he can keep it high action in the match. There's two women's matches on the main card. We've got Adele Thornerino and Helena Crevar both in action. And given the fact that they are probably right now of like the active competitors at ADCC elite level, who we're seeing a lot of, the best submission artists, I would think they'd be favored to win both their matches by submission. So one, give me your thoughts on that. And then two, what do you think about the fact that if like Helena and Adele won, even although they're in different weight classes, we could maybe see a match between them in the future?
Yeah, I think they are quite heavily favoured to win their matches, probably by submission as well. As far as them facing off against each other, I think there was good matches for both of them within their own weight classes, but they're definitely now, given this past year, two of the biggest names in women's jiu-jitsu. It's difficult when you get a lighter athlete that's won the absolute. Do you then just offer them bigger guys because it's not their weight class? It doesn't seem necessarily fair unless they're offering that up for themselves. But at the same time, she has won the absolute. Again, it comes down to are they compensating her well enough for taking a match outside her weight class? Like if you're offering a lighter athlete, a bigger athlete for the same sort of pay or same opportunities as you would get for someone your own weight class, there's not really an incentive for you to do that. Unless it's a match you think you can win or can do something for your career. So I think that would be cool and interesting to see. We know that Adele has the capability of beating those bigger female grapplers. So an interesting one potentially in the future, I think.
I wonder if, like, while Helena's kind of there in terms of competing at that ADCC level, whether they're still, I think New Wave are like very wary of like pacing their athletes. through like progressing in matches, and like Adele being the queen of the ADCC last time. I wonder whether New Wave would just want Helena to wait a little bit before jumping up and taking that match. Like maybe they'd be looking at that. Like for them, that would ideally be the match in 2 years at the next ADCC. Like Helena being able to beat Adele, because like Helena's not been at like the absolute like top level for that long. And like her progression has been paced. And then, yeah, Adele blew out of nowhere for like, not out of nowhere, but certainly like, I think it was a surprise how dominant she was at the ADCC. So maybe she'll want to like just consolidate her position a little bit before taking on like more dangerous challenges. So I could see from a matchmaking perspective, like maybe that would just come a little bit at the wrong time for both of them. But I think it's like, they're both young and exciting grapplers, and that's great for women's jiu-jitsu that like they have people like that at the forefront of the competitions. And then yeah, like a couple of other like young guns who are going to be exciting to watch, like WNO, Fabio Christian and Max Hansen. I think that rounds out the main card. So any thoughts on those two and their matches?
Yeah, we're supposed to have Andrew Tackett in that match, which I was looking forward to quite a bit, but I think that's still an interesting match. I think Max just won Black Belt Pans, which was his first major title at Black Belt in IBJJF, so two really good guys and looking forward to watching them. Like I say, wish Andrew was in that match, but he seems to be getting injured quite a lot recently. He's obviously quite a intense grappler, I'm sure, in the training room as well as competition. So hopefully this doesn't become a running theme throughout his career. But yeah, that's still an interesting match that we've got between Fabio and Max.
Well, no, Max and Fabio. Maybe I said that up slightly wrong. So like Fabio's got Daniel Saffler, I believe.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and then Max has got Carlos Enrique. I was just saying hard, like, yeah, maybe like those two could face if they both win. That'd be a good match. But I was just putting them together in terms of like two young grapplers who should be in like high action matches just to round out the card. But yeah, you're right. Andrew Tackett was going to go up against Fabre, and I was super excited to see that match. Hopefully, Andrew coming off like one of the most exciting matches we've ever seen in jiu-jitsu can stay healthy. I think he's had like back problems in the not too distant past.
Yeah.
That have caused him a bit of problem. So like, yeah. But yeah, Fabio, Max, anything on the undercard that has jumped out?
Nothing too much, to be honest, no.
Okay, well, let's keep it going. So that's Wednesday. Then UFC Fight Pass Invitational 9 is on Thursday. And this event is headlined by Mikey Musumeci against Felipe Machado. And this is Mikey's first match under his new UFC contract. And I believe he's the first grappler who's got an exclusive deal with UFC / Fight Pass Invitational. So what do you think about UFC signing Mikey? What do you think about Mikey's decision to compete at the weight he's chosen to compete at?
Yeah, as far as signing athletes, he's got star power, so it's a good one to kick it off. But I think it's good that they are signing people. We were having a conversation before we started the record button, and we spoke about how some of the narratives potentially aren't there for a lot of these super fight matches, and I posed the question if that was because a lot of athletes seem to jump between promotions, so they maybe don't have the time to build up the narratives of different athletes potentially facing in the future. So hopefully if people can hold down some people in a single promotion, they can potentially build some interesting matches in the future. As far as Mikey competing at 135 pounds, I mean, Felipe is a really good grappler. We spoke about him before when we talked about the Brazilian trials for ADCC, popped onto my radar at AIGA, and I was very impressed watching him. But it feels a little bit to me like Mikey's first WNO match, where it was a bit of a tune-up match, to be honest, and just kind of inviting him into the promotion, almost like a lamb to slaughter. With Mikey, it's interesting because when he was last competing in the gi, he was going between light feather and rooster weight, and he was so dominant, he was kind of getting bored, and he was starting to do crazy things like enter the absolute division or enter competitions at heavyweight for like Pan Ams, because he was wanting to challenge himself more. And now that he's switched over to no gi, it seems like he's almost cowered himself away a little bit at 135 pounds, and I really don't think there's much interest in matches for him at that weight. There's nobody below 66 that I can really see giving him much of a competitive match, and I think he's definitely capable of competing with the 66 guys. Like I say, he used to do light featherweight. He beat Pato in the gi back in the day. Yes, he looks very lean and slim now, but there would be nothing stopping him putting on a little bit of weight to get some more interested matches against the likes of Baby Shark and Pato. He submitted Gabriel Souza not too long ago, so we know he can compete against those guys at that weight class. So I'm just hoping with him being signed at this UFC Fight Pass Invitational, he's not just going to be taking matches only at 135 pounds against these guys that I don't really think could put much of a challenge up against him. I'd like to see him go up to 145 pounds or more and get some more interesting matches against the likes of Pato and Baby Shark.
Yeah, I think like for Fight Pass Invitational's perspective, if they've invested in Mikey, it would be sensible to get as tight in matches as possible with as big a names as possible. I don't see anyone at the smaller weight class that kind of in no-gi that you're able to do that with. So I think like the big matches are against the likes of Pato, Baby Shark, Gabriel Souza, etc. Can you do catch weights? I don't like. Yes, you can. You can do whatever you want. But like finding a way to get Mikey in those matches, no-gi would be like what I'd be trying to do. Otherwise, I think you're just going to have like a series of like showcase matches where Mikey's probably going to be heavily favored. The one thing I think is interesting from the UFC Fight Pass Invitational perspective as well is like you've chosen a grappler who, if people have Fight Pass for I know like the crossover between people who watch Jiu Jitsu and people who watch MMA isn't probably that big, right? But if your poster boy for your events is someone who plays Jiu Jitsu like Mikey, he's going to come out and sit down. And like a lot of people who have the platform to watch are going to be watching MMA, etc. I don't know how much like you're going to get them wanting to watch Mikey. Just his style's very niche, shall we say. It doesn't even appeal to like masses of jiu-jitsu fans, I don't think. So, but he does have a name, and he does have like he is an interesting character, and you can be engaging. But like I just wonder like the style matches as well. If Mikey's like better than the people he's playing against, and he's able just to sit and entangle guard and stuff like that, then I don't know how interesting and exciting that is for like a promotion to build upon. Hopefully we find a way to get the matches against like the bigger names at the smaller weight. I think that's fair to say, yeah. So we'll see how Mikey does first match on FPI, but yeah, we're hoping for like some bigger names in the future.
Yeah, what you were saying about the kind of showcase matches, I feel like that's what we've gotten with Mikey the past few years at one, and I feel like it's just been a massive waste in the middle of the prime of his career, considering the kind of potential we saw for him when he switched over to no-gi and then the success he had in the gi. I really feel like it's been a wasted few years at one, and I'm sure he's made a lot of money at one and whatever, which is good for him, but as far as getting to see him from the fans' perspective, and for Mikey as far as building a legacy and beating good names, it's been a bit of a waste of a few years in my opinion, so I really would like to see him against some of the bigger names.
Right, let's run through a few more matches on this card, right? Interesting stylistic matchup between Jason Nolf and Renato Canuto. How do you see that one going?
Yeah, so they're giving him someone that is not going to do a Mikey and sit to their butt, more than likely. Well, someone that typically doesn't do that. Whether we'll see Renato do that in this match, because we assume Nolf is going to have a considerable wrestling advantage, we don't know. We did see Ty stand with Jason Nolf in the CGI, and he had a lot of success. I think he put on a really good display of jiu-jitsu in the stand-up department, represented jiu-jitsu well in that facet, and the fact that he was able to play a kind of different game than a typical only wrestling sort of game. He was able to snatch up submissions, mix in different things on the feet, and Renato's definitely got that capability as well. Saw him win his last match on Fight Pass with a scissor takedown into a heel hook, so that's a weapon we know he's got in his arsenal. We know he can jump on things like flying triangles. We know he can snatch up some front headlock attacks. So I think probably we'll see Renato stand with him. Whether we'll see Jason be a bit more experienced with defending those kind of things, having experienced the match against Ty and then have some more time to train and work on those things, is yet to be seen. But yeah, I think jiu-jitsu wise, we obviously know Renato's got a massive advantage. We know pure wrestling wise, Jason's got a massive advantage. It's going to be whether Renato wants to stand with him or not, and whether he can use his jiu-jitsu on the feet to snatch up certain positions.
Okay, possibly match of the night could be Nick Mataya against Ronaldo Jr.
Yeah, so I think this Nick Mataya might be unknown for a lot of people. If you don't really follow the B Team's YouTube channel, as far as I'm aware, he's not really had much big matches yet. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's a big step up for him.
Yeah, so I think I've heard a lot of good things about all the guys at B Team, and there's a lot of if you YouTube his name, you'll see rounds against him versus J-Rod, him versus Joseph Chen, Nicky Ryan, and all that. He's a very athletic wrestler, very explosive, good stand-up. As far as his wider jiu-jitsu game, I'm not too sure. Most of the time at B Team, we do see him standing against those kind of guys. I think he was helping them prepare a lot for ADCC and CJI. As far as him facing Ronaldo, we know Ronaldo's going to have a ton more experience in competition, going to have a massive jiu-jitsu advantage, but Ronaldo has been playing on the feet a lot of his no-gi game as well, so we'll see if Nick's wrestling advantage will come into that. Both these guys are super explosive and move a lot, so I think it is going to be more than likely a very exciting match. It's just going to be whether Ronaldo's going to pull or not, whether Nick can take him down and keep him down, whether Ronaldo's going to be able to do what we spoke about with Renato and maybe snatch something up on the feet. So a lot of question marks in this match, and big step up in competition from not really seeing him compete in competition that much as far as Nick Mayata, but I think it's got the potential to be a really exciting match.
Yeah. And then we have Kyle Chambers against Jonnatas Gracie, and in terms of potential excitement, this is one I'm not sure about, because I could see this match being Jonnatas on top with like loads of heavy pressure, Kyle defended, but then maybe Jonnatas not getting the finish because Kyle's submission defense is really good. What do you think about this match?
Yeah, I think I've not really kept up with Kyle much since that Who's Next show where he got to the finals against Isaak, and then it was that infamous 3 odd hour long match where, yeah, he was able to avoid getting submitted for that long. It's obviously going to be different circumstances here. Obviously in a 3 hour match, when you've got the possibility of just fatiguing your opponent by not getting submitted for 3 hours, you're going to play a different game than you would here in a 10 to 15 minute match. But not really looked at a lot of Kyle's matches since then, but considering how the match with Jonnatas Gracie went against Jacob Couch, and similar style in a way with Kyle Chambers, I think, but nowhere near as polished as Jacob Couch. I do see Jonnatas having a very positionally dominant performance against Kyle. Like you say, whether he can get the submission at some point in the match, I'm not sure, but yeah, I see Jonnatas getting on top in this match and implementing his passing and top game quite well against Kyle.
Right, and then for like the rest of the card, I think we have Raquel Canuto against Michelle Oliveira on the main card, and then like the next names I'll mention are on the undercard. So I just want you to like highlight anything you think will be interesting. So like there's Ryan Aitken in action, Damian Anderson's in action, Michael Pixley, Shelby Murphy, like What out of all those guys are you interested in seeing?
The only match that I'm really familiar with the guys on both end is Ryan Aitken versus Gabriel Almeida. And both of those guys were competing at 88 kilos at ADCC. So Ryan submit Pedro, which was a big win for him. Pedro, Marinho, and then Gabriel as well was around about that level. So be interested to see how those two guys match up. Always like seeing Damian Anderson compete. I'm not really sure about his opponent, and then same with Michael Pixley as well. So it's hard to really give a comment on those ones where I don't know both sides of the match, but I'm sure their matches will be interesting given their previous performances.
Yeah, so we have WNO 25 on Wednesday, then FPI 9 on Thursday. We'll have reviews of the events, and then we're into IBJJF Nogi Worlds, which I believe is the 11th to 14th of December. So there's plenty of Nogi action coming up, and the Jiu Jitsu Oracle will be here to preview and review all of it.